was the summer of 2001 or 2002. I was at the Ontario Mills Mall in California with my aunt when we went to the now extinct electronics boutique. I had just gotten the Dreamcast and was looking for some new games. I had already played Resident Evil Code Veronica, as well as Echo the Dolphin, Defender of the Future, and a few others. I was curious as to what else was out there. At this point, the Dreamcast had already lost popularity to the PS2, and finding games would become harder. I don't remember what else was on display at the time, although there were two that caught my attention: D2 and Illbleed, both for the Dreamcast. For the record, I didn't get to play D2 for at least another 10 or so years. More on that in another episode. I had to make a choice that day, and I chose Illbleed.
You'll vomit with excitement. You'll puke with pleasure. You'll shit with fear.
Illbleed was released in the US in April of 2001, and was the last Dreamcast game by the studio Crazy Games, led by Shinya Nishigaki, which came just months after Sega announced it would stop production of the Dreamcast. What a rough time to release a game. With production taking years, studios must often grapple with the decision to release on current hardware or wait and try to maximize on the next generation's abilities. I had never heard of Illbleed or even read anything about it, but decided to give it a try. It turned out to be a great find. This would be my introduction to the weirdest corner of Japanese horror, and one of the most bizarre and messed up games that I've ever played, at least at that time. So much so that I think of it often. Reading about Illbleed's creator, Shinya Nishigaki, I was not surprised that he had some familiar passions. Here's a quote from John Anderson of Gamasutra's interview with Shinya. Illbleed requires a high degree of intelligence to play. There are many mysteries and horror, old and new. I attempted to mix the early visions of all the famous directors, Cameron, Spielberg, Lucas, Miyazaki, and Kurosawa. It was just an entire mix of entertainment that many people couldn't understand. To me, the negative reviews of the game did not affect me at all. I just looked toward the future and had a vision. My thinking method is to have an ending approach. I wanted to do an American thriller and suspense movie title. For 3 months, I thought about the ending boss itself, and how complex it was going to be. I was thinking about this idea for a long time. I wanted to have a logical structure and comedy. When, where, who, why, and how. This is my logical structure base. After 3 months, I finished the layout and basic concept of the game, from the maps, the mini-movies, purpose, and trying to mix in American B-movies. Shinya had a strong desire to make cinematic games due to his love of American and European cinema. As a child, he was the son of an advertising executive who would often take him to movie premieres for free, allowing him to feast to his heart's content on some of the newest films in Japan. By consuming so many films at a young age, Shinya grew into a creator full of crazy ideas, itching to get them out into the world. Production of Illbleed took a year and a half. Nishigaki dove into pre-production, presenting the story in a B-movie style that had never been done before in a video game, starring our purple-haired heroine, Eriko Christie, who starts the game's narrative with a speech at her high school detailing her experiences growing up with a horror-obsessed father who ran a traveling horror caravan. The idea seems to be some kind of mashup of a carnival sideshow and ironic horror memes that wander the country, maybe even visiting your hometown. Often, Eriko was the guinea pig to her father's twisted ideas of fun. After her mother divorced her father, an estrangement grew between the involved parties. This would impact Eriko as a teenager to the extent where she considered majoring in child psychology, presumably to prevent child abuse or at least understand why her father did what he did. After being congratulated on her speech, Eriko meets up with her friends, Kevin Kurtzman, Randy Fairbanks, and Michelle Waters. Michelle presents tickets to the others to a horror theme park called Illbleed, created by a certain Michael Reynolds. Here it comes, get ready for it. Those who can make it through the theme park will win $100 million. The others seem to think that it's going to be a cakewalk through the park. Eriko is apprehensive about the whole thing and declines to go since she feels it's suspicious. The instruction booklet for the game has a disclaimer. The prize money is in-game. It is not actually given out to anyone who can beat Illbleed. 4 days later, Eriko goes to the park herself anyway to search for her now missing friends. This is where the game begins. The park itself consists of a central hub area, a cemetery, Bloody Mary's shop where you can buy various items such as health for insane prices, Dummy Man's photo booth, which serves as the game's save point, in and outside of the game stages as well, an emergency room where you can have various surgeries and organ replacements to increase character stats. There is also a bank where you can revive deceased characters, and the Cinema Zone. Cinema Zone is where all the hot action takes place. Each of the 6 attractions here are based on a different B-horror movie directed by Michael Reynolds. You approach each attraction, which is housed inside of its own movie theater. Progressing through each movie is done in a linear fashion, starting with the theater called Minnesota Hell Cinema, and its stage called The Home Run of Death. You cannot see the names of the other movies until you complete the one before it. Before each level starts, we are treated to an opening cinematic about the story and characters for the particular cinema you entered. The voiceover work during these scenes are my favorite. Michael Reynolds has a deep radio voice that sets the scene appropriately, like any horror movie trailer. This narrative within a narrative makes it extra creepy and memorable. Here's a clip which sets up the first level for you.
You play a sport, a game, knowing full well that you're going to either win or lose. You never expect to die before your dreams come true. Neither did Jimmy or his father, Gail Banballo, a Minnesota innkeeper. He set up a secret baseball practice arena in the basement of his inn, where he and his son practiced day after day. Jimmy's hard work and batting skills finally led his team to a state victory. It started out a crisp spring day, but before Jimmy could go outside to play, he and his dad went downstairs to bat the ball around a few times. Upstairs, some teenagers had been playing with fire, turning the inn into a raging blaze that was soon out of control. The inn was a total loss, and so was Jimmy, burned in minutes. Mr. Banballo was so badly maimed, he turned into a hideous monster, oozing and bleeding, snarling and growling like a beast, enraged and bent on revenge. He tracked down the kids responsible for the fire and killed them one by one with a blowtorch. That wasn't enough for Banballo. He won't leave his inn or his memories, so there he waits, in ambush.
After the level intro, you are taken to the next screen that talks about your objectives while exploring each attraction. I've always found the layout and design of the requirements screen very interesting. It's set up like a newspaper. If Illbleed were a real place, you know all the major news stations would cover it. After this, another screen displays a list of requirements needed to earn the prize money. This is where the game deviates from your traditional survival horror. The only normal thing about the requirements is a bonus for clearing the attraction within a set amount of time. Everything else, just whoa. You need to clear a set number of traps, your heart rate needs to be below a certain BPM, hit points must meet or exceed a certain number, adrenaline must also meet or exceed a set number, and bleeding must meet or be under a certain number. If you don't meet the set requirements for each of the objectives, you lose prize money. Your total prize to be earned for this first level is $50,000. The last screen is a character select screen. Eriko is the only playable one at the start. I wonder who the others will be. Once you start the attraction level, you'll notice, at the top of the game screen, is the character's senses. You have sight, smell, hearing, and a sixth sense. These play into letting you know when you're near a trap. The sixth sense serves to let you know that either an item is nearby or an enemy encounter. The starting point of the stage leads to an unavoidable trap to let you know what you're in for. This is the game designer's way of telling the player to slow down and that this isn't going to be the kind of game you can run through. When traps are triggered, it goes into a first-person mode and you see what the trap does. In this case, you look up above to see a small wooden archway where a plank of wood falls on Eriko. Traps are unavoidable if triggered, and are a big part of the game, which is why you need a special item called the Horror Monitor. This device allows Eriko and other characters to scan a room for jump scares and essentially disarm traps, earning adrenaline in the process. However, you never get back as much adrenaline as you consume. This prevents you from disarming every trap in the level. You can stock up on adrenaline replenishing items in the hub world, but if this is your first playthrough, it would actually harm you. Also, when you activate this device, the camera moves into a first-person mode, and you can look around your current location, but you cannot move. You can only scan the immediate area. There are so many traps that you have to choose what to use it on. The player must strategically make their way through the level, trying to take as little damage as possible. This isn't the kind of game where you can beat a level unscathed. Bleeding is measured in cc's per second, and running while badly bleeding only worsens it and causes you to take damage. This is true to the game's title. Heart rate increases after a shock event / jump scare, and if high enough, you could actually pass out. Further shock events, and even dodging while your heart rate is too high will kill you, resulting in a shock death. Dodging is also an ability and is essential to survival. The ability is only present during enemy fights and boss encounters. You can't actually use it during regular gameplay to avoid traps. It makes you invincible for a second while you're getting attacked by enemies and bosses, but comes with the penalty of a pulse increase. So you can't do it forever. The battles are an interesting addition. When an enemy appears, you're moved into a separate screen. The camera angle locks to a third-person perspective. The battle takes place within a small range of the area you were exploring. You cannot believe beyond a range where the floor is highlighted in blue. The first enemy encounter can be hard for first-timers, as you don't have a weapon and can only attack with your bare hands. Thankfully, 99% of regular enemy encounters let you escape. Usually in the center of the encounter area is a helipad. You can see the shadow of a helicopter flying overhead. You rapid press the B button, I believe, to call down a ladder. You are still vulnerable to enemy attacks, so it is necessary to dodge or run away and return to the helipad to continue to call the ladder. Once the ladder reaches you, you are met with the message, "Narrow escape," and you are pulled up to safety. You are then returned to your exact location in the next screen before the encounter. These sequences can be tricky to get through at times. The camera angles are not always set in the ideal locations. Each playable character has their own starting stats. This makes the game more complex than it might appear at first. Being raised in a horror carnival certainly would give Eriko an advantage. Hidden in each stage are various items that you can use to have surgeries with prize money that you win in-game. Such surgeries will increase your HP, reduce the amount you bleed, reduce the rate of speed your heart increases, and also increases your adrenaline capacity. Surgeries are performed by the dummy man characters, which are just crash test dummies dressed in surgical gowns. As I had mentioned, each character has different stats. An example is that one character has higher adrenaline but lower HP, Another character would have the opposite stats. This makes playing as different characters a fun experience, and you can invest prize money into upgrading your favorites. There are 3 other characters besides Eriko that you can rescue throughout the game, but this is optional. There is even a hidden ending if you play the game a second time and don't rescue anyone. If you do this, each stage you get through removes an article of Eriko's clothing until she's almost naked, save for some carefully placed ripped articles of clothing. It is here when you reach the final stage, the Horror Museum. You learn more about who Michael Reynolds really is, and you also fight the last boss. When I say I had never played anything like this before, believe me. At the time, I didn't understand the kind of game that it really was. I found the premise to be pretty disturbing and didn't get the game's sense of humor. I had talked about some of this in a previous episode. Who makes a theme park that is really out to kill anyone who enters? Like one of those crazy Asian shows like Squid Game. It took me a while to actually get through the game. The first level really creeped me out, and I didn't get very far. As much as I mustered up the courage, I just stopped. The game often breaks the fourth wall, and the player's character is reminded that they're inside a haunted house that's run by people behind the scenes. In a later stage, when you're ready to fight a boss, there's technical difficulties. The park's workers are trying to get the boss to rise up from mechanical doors, and even acknowledge the player as a customer.
Sorry, we're having trouble getting the boss character out. Hold on a second, please. Hey, we got another customer waiting here. Hurry up.
Try turning on the switch again. Okay, here goes.
The seemingly evil machinations don't discriminate between workers and park guests. The boss smacks the workers off the platform as it notices the player. The same boss character malfunctions as you beat it, which results in some pretty disturbing facial contortion animations and the sounds of metal screeching to a halt. An interesting fact also is that there's an in-game health drink called Hassie. The item name was also used similarly in Crazy Game's previous game called Blue Stinger, and also used in a more recent game called 2064 Read-Only Memories. I had played that game and was surprised to see this referenced many years after Illbleed. The game has stuck with so many other people. In one of my previous episodes, I even made a fake commercial for Hassie. Nothing hits a spot like a Hassie Cola.
Hassie Cola.
The voiceover work is as well as it could be for the early 2000s.
Hey everybody! You gotta see this!
What, Michelle? Why didn't you listen to Eriko's speech?
I don't need to. I know she'll win. Here, take a look at this.
Those are guest invitations to Illbleed. How'd you get them?
From a Pepco promotion.
Kill! Look, we can win $100 million there.
This is further exacerbated by audio compression. Both the dialogue, music, and some sound effects are slightly hindered by the audio quality at times. I always wonder what the boss music would sound like uncompressed. At this point in history, a lot of game music was made digitally. For Illbleed, I feel like some of the tracks evoked an orchestral feel for certain music tracks, but was hampered by compression. One of the boss music tracks is a good example. It kind of has a Jaws feel to it. Listen. I came across this comment on Twitter from 2019. That little window of time in the mid to late 90s, where audio and video compression playback tech was affordable, but devs had no idea how to use it and produced some of the weirdest games in history. The quality of the audio files don't take away from the presentation, and kind of adds to it. At this point, I wonder if it was intentional. Who knows? Graphically, it looks pretty well. The game environments do a great job of feeling gritty, bloody, and desolated. Textures are varied for each level you visit, and nothing feels overused. Dreamcast games generally look pretty great. I don't think I've seen a bad-looking game on the system. Some people may disagree. Then again, graphics are not that important to me, as the stories and writing that go into them. Illbleed's visual presentation does well and adds to the horror of the world it's set in. To this day, I've yet to play a game which replicates my experience with this game. Most horror games that I've played have been more traditional. If you get the chance to check it out, I'd love to hear what you think. There was a possibility that Illbleed, as well as another title called Blue Stinger, would be ported to other consoles, but that idea was shelved after the death of Shinya Nishigaki on February 14, 2004. This was one of the last games Shinya got to create. Illbleed is such a unique niche game that we may never get another quite like it. The best we can do is support developers who are inspired by creators like Nishigaki in order to build on his legacy. It's funny. The game, Danganronpa, is actually inspired by Illbleed. The creator of that game posted a tweet in 2014 mentioning it. He says, "The story of Danganronpa is affected by Illbleed, a Dreamcast game. That game was crazy. I love the game that is crazy." I'll leave you with this quote from Shinya that really stuck out to me. "If one person likes Illbleed, then to me, it's a success." Pretty inspirational, not just for the game, but for whatever you may do in life. Thank you for sticking by and supporting this podcast. It's very much appreciated. I'm already working on my next episode. More to come soon. Take care and stay safe.